Hi, my name is Alex and I'm 28 years old. I grew up in Rapid City, South Dakota, and am an only child. My parents are doctors and growing up in such a household was quite an experience. My dad, Gerald, was a surgeon and was highly admired, to the point that you could even see his name in the local papers sometimes. My mom, Hannah, on the other hand, was a pediatrician, and my parents' nickname was the dynamic duo of medicine in our neighborhood. From as far back as I can remember, it was clear that I would also follow in their path and become a doctor. All the family dinners were filled with talk of surgeries, patient stories, and medical breakthroughs, and even my toys were often replaced with anatomy books and doctor kits. It was not that my parents were pushy, but they just genuinely believed that medicine was in my blood. And in a way, it was hard not to get caught up in their passion and the sense of purpose that came with it. But I had this secret. Well, it was not a total secret because I did drop hints here and there, and that was I loved art. Growing up, I always used to sketch for hours, and fashion, in particular, fascinated me from a young age. I used to flip through different magazines while other kids were reading comic books, and I even tried designing clothes for fun, though I kept that pretty under wraps because I knew it was not exactly what my parents had in mind for me. High school was also a form of balancing act, as I used to juggle my schoolwork and art projects while also shadowing my dad in the hospital or helping my mom in her office. Then, after graduating, I enrolled myself in the University of Minnesota Medical School, given my parents' expectations, and I even remember the day I got accepted into it. My parents were over the moon and their faces were lit up with pride. I also wanted to feel the same excitement, but there was this nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I knew that I was about to put my dream on hold, or worse, bury it completely. Mom, Dad, I have something to tell you. What is it, son? You look serious. Is everything okay, Alex? I got accepted into med school. Alex, that's incredible. We are so proud of you. Oh, honey, this is wonderful news. You are going to be a great doctor, just like your father. Yeah, it's great. Why don't we celebrate? I will cook your favorite meal tonight. Actually, there's something I need to talk to you about. What happened? We are here for you, sweetheart. It's just, I have been feeling a bit off. I'm not sure if med school is the right path for me. Son, it's natural to have doubts, especially when starting on such a challenging journey. But remember, medicine is a noble profession, and you have the opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. No, it's not that. It's just, I don't feel the same excitement about medicine that you both do. Your father's right, Alex. It is not always about excitement, it's about dedication and service to others. I guess you both are right. I will join medical school then. That's my boy. We want what is best for you, above all else, okay? It was not that I didn't care about medicine. I did. I saw the good my parents did and the lives they had changed, and I respected it deeply, but I also knew that my true passion lay elsewhere. It was a constant internal conflict, trying to live up to my parents' expectations while staying true to myself. Every time I visited home, I used to see my old sketches tucked away in my room, and the longing would hit me all over again. I would sit at the dinner table and listen to my parents discuss their cases, and I could not help but feel like I was living someone else's life. I wanted to make them proud, but I also wanted to be happy. I moved to Minneapolis for college, and the first year of med school was a whirlwind. Everyone always said it would be tough, but living it was something else entirely. The days were long and filled with endless lectures, labs, and study sessions that stretched into the night, and my classmates seemed to thrive on the chaos, but for me, it was a different story. I felt like I was constantly trying to keep my head above water, and there was this growing feeling that I didn't quite belong there. In the middle of all this, I found myself more and more drawn to fashion. Runway shows became my guilty pleasure, and I used to stay up late watching them online and marveling at the creativity and innovation on display. Sketching was already my escape from an early age, so I used to fill the margins of my notebooks with doodles of different designs, dresses, suits, etc., and I even started experimenting with my own wardrobe. Before, I used to wear plain and practical clothes, as was the taste of my parents in a classic medical household, but after moving out, I began mixing patterns, playing with colors, and adding unique accessories. Some of my classmates took notice and some were impressed while others were confused, but I did not care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was expressing a part of myself that had been hidden away. But even as I enjoyed these small things, the demands of med school loomed large. There was always another test to study for, another paper to write, another clinical to prepare for, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Every time I sat down to study, I felt the weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on me. They had given so much to pave the way for my success, and the thought of disappointing them was unbearable. Yet, the more I involved myself in fashion, the harder it became to ignore the growing disconnection between my dreams and my reality. A lot of times I used to daydream in class and pictured my designs on the runway and wondered what it would be like to work in that world. I knew I could not keep living a double life, torn between my duty and my passion. But leaping to make a career in fashion full-time felt impossible, and I could not imagine turning my back on everything my parents had worked so hard for. Sometimes I could not even justify chasing a dream that seemed so small and nothing compared to the life-saving work of medicine. These questions haunted me all the time, and so I used to push back any thought of dropping out of med school. Then, it was in my first year only that I met Michelle, my ex-girlfriend now. I met her at a local fair just as med school was kicking off. It was one of those rare weekends when we were not buried under a mountain of textbooks, and so we decided to visit the fair, which was being held close by. I remember I had spotted her near the Ferris wheel and she was wearing a red-colored dress. We later struck up a conversation while waiting in line for funnel cakes, and I was immediately drawn to her energy and confidence. We started dating a few weeks later. At first, it was great. Michelle was fun and outgoing, always knowing the best places to go and the coolest things to do. She used to drag me out of my med school bubble and used to take me to trendy new restaurants and spontaneous weekend trips, and for a while, it felt like she was exactly what I needed, a break from the relentless grind of school. But as time went on, I began to notice things about Michelle that were less than ideal. She was extremely self-obsessive. Our conversations often revolved around her, be it her looks, her ambitions, her opinions, and she used to spend hours in front of the mirror, and every date seemed to turn into an impromptu photo shoot. One time, we were late to a friend's birthday party because she couldn't decide which outfit made her look more stunning. Then there was the pettiness. Michelle had a way of turning the smallest issues into big dramas. Like if a waitress got her order wrong, it was a personal affront, and if I didn't notice a new haircut or compliment her outfit, it turned into a lecture on how much effort she put into looking good. And greed, which was the worst of all. It became clear that Michelle had expensive tastes and expected me to keep up. She loved designer clothes, fine dining, and lavish gifts, but only as long as I was spending the money. Early on, I tried to spend a lot on her, thinking it would make her happy. But it never seemed enough. Once, she hinted heavily that she wanted a pricey handbag for her birthday. I saved up and bought it, hoping it would show her how much I cared, but her reaction pissed me off and shocked me to another level. She simply said that she thought I would buy her a limited edition one and not this cheap one. Mind you, that cheap cost me $5,000. But there was this one moment that really hit me hard. We were at a holiday party, and I overheard Michelle bragging to a group about how she was training her med school boyfriend to be a proper doctor and gentleman. The way she spoke about me like some kind of project rather than a partner hurt deeply. It made me realize how unhealthy our relationship had become. Later, when I confronted her, she dodged the whole thing pretty smoothly by saying it was just a joke and that I was thinking too much about it. Despite all these red flags, I stuck with her. Part of me was in denial and hoped that she would change or that I was just being too critical, and then another part of me was scared of being alone, especially with the pressures of med school. Michelle was a constant in my life, and breaking up seemed like adding more chaos to an already overwhelming situation. I knew I had to make a change, but the idea of confronting her and dealing with the fallout was daunting, and I kept hoping things would get better. Deep down, I knew I deserved someone who saw me as more than just a means to an end. Now, by the second year of med school, I was really starting to feel the pressure. The stress and lack of fulfillment were taking a serious toll on my mental health. Every day felt like a struggle to get through. I used to wake up dreading the long hours of a high-pressure environment that never felt like it was for me, and my sketches and fashion dreams felt like a distant memory buried under the weight of textbooks and clinical rotations. One particularly exhausting week was the cause of my breaking point. We had back-to-back exams and intense clinical rotations. I barely slept and was surviving on coffee and sheer willpower. One night, I found myself in the library at 2 a.m., staring blankly at my notes and feeling completely drained. My mind kept wandering to the latest Fashion Week photos I had seen, and I kept on imagining myself in that world instead of this one. That week, everything came crashing down on me. During a clinical rotation, I made a careless mistake, which was a small one, but it shook me and I realized that I was so mentally checked out that I was becoming a liability. The thought of continuing down this path for years to come was unbearable. After that, I knew I couldn't keep ignoring my true passion and I needed to make a change before I lost myself completely. So that weekend, I went home to talk to my parents. It was one of the hardest conversations I have ever had. We sat around the kitchen table and I just poured my heart out. I told them how miserable I was and how I felt like I was living someone else's life. My parents were disappointed and it was written all over their faces. My dad was silent for a long time and my mom tried to understand, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. They had always dreamed of me following in their footsteps, and here I was, tearing that dream apart. We had a long, tearful, and heated conversation. My dad raised his voice for the first time I could remember, asking why I hadn't spoken up sooner. My mom kept asking if I was sure if this wasn't just a phase. It was heartbreaking, but I stood my ground. I explained how I had tried to meet their expectations, but I couldn't keep living a lie. I have made a decision. I'm dropping out of medical school. What? Alex, you can't be serious. But honey, you have worked so hard to get into med school. Why would you want to drop out? I know it's disappointing, but I can't keep living a lie. Medicine isn't my passion, and I can't force myself to continue down a path that doesn't feel right. My dad was seething in anger at this point, and it was visible on his face. But why? Why didn't you say anything sooner? I tried, Dad. I really did. But I was afraid of disappointing you both. I thought if I just pushed through, maybe I would learn to love it. But are you sure, Alex? Is this just a phase? Maybe you will come to appreciate medicine once you are further along in your studies. No, Mom, this isn't a phase. I have tried to meet your expectations, but I can't sacrifice my own happiness for the sake of fulfilling a dream that is not mine. But what are you going to do now, huh? Dropping out of med school is a big decision. You need to have a plan. I do have a plan, Dad. I'm going to pursue my passion for fashion design. I have already started working on some designs and I believe I can make a career out of it. Fashion design? That's nonsense. It took a while, but eventually they began to understand. My mom was the first to soften up and said she just wanted me to be happy. My dad, on the other hand, was tougher to convince, but he came around after seeing how serious and passionate I was about fashion. They did not fully get it, but they supported me, and that support meant the world to me, even if it came with a little disappointment. And so after talking with my parents, I decided to leave med school. It was a massive decision, but I felt a weight lift off my shoulders the moment I made it. It was not easy, but knowing that my parents were behind me gave me the strength to pursue my true passion, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Now, breaking the news to Michelle that I was dropping out of med school was something I dreaded almost as much as telling my parents. I knew she would not take it well, as she had always been vocal about how much she loved the idea of dating a future doctor. In her eyes, my decision was nothing short of a betrayal of the perfect future she had imagined. I decided to tell her over dinner at her favorite restaurant and hoped that the setting might soften the blow. But as soon as I said the words, she stared at me like I had grown a second head, and then just laughed this cold, humorless laugh. The shock and disbelief was written all across her face. I have decided to leave med school. You are joking, right? No, Michelle, I'm not joking. What the hell are you thinking, Alex? You are throwing away everything for what? Some silly fashion dream? You know how miserable I have been for the past few months, and designing is the only thing that has been keeping me sane. Huh, so you think you can just waltz into the fashion world and make it? You are delusional, Alex. Michelle, please try to understand. I have put up with so much, supporting you through all those long nights, and this is how you repay me? By quitting? I stayed quiet and thought she was just angry and would get over it. But no. I need someone with ambition, Alex. Someone who is going places. Clearly, that is not you. The dinner had quickly turned into a disaster. She had barely touched her food, and the tension between us was very much visible. Michelle kept bringing up all the sacrifices she had made, as if my decision had offended her personally. I wanted to tell her that she had not been as supportive as she thought, but I bit my tongue because there was no point in making things uglier than they already were. It also opened my eyes to how Michelle's priorities had always been about status and appearances, and my dropping out of med school shattered the image she wanted to project. She was more concerned about what her friends and family would think than about my happiness. We barely spoke on the ride back to her apartment, and as soon as we got there, she turned to me and said that she couldn't do this anymore, and that she needed someone who matched her drive and goals, and that is how she broke up with me. I stood there for a minute and started processing what had just happened. Part of me was devastated, but another part felt an odd sense of relief because Michelle had always been demanding and self-centered, and deep down I knew we were not right for each other. But the least she could have done was stick to me in my tough times, but I guess I was expecting too much from her. So now, with med school and Michelle behind me, I packed my bags and headed to New York City. It was overwhelming at first because it was so big and so fast-paced. I took on odd jobs to support myself, and during the day, I hustled to modeling auditions and fashion events, trying to get a chance to prove myself. The beginning was brutal and rejections came fast and often. I used to walk into auditions only to be turned down in seconds after being told that I was too tall, too thin, or not the right look. Each critique stung, but I refused to give up. I treated every rejection as a lesson and used the feedback to hone my skills and refine my look. I remember one particular audition for a small-time runway show. I thought I had nailed it, but the casting director pulled me aside and said that I had potential, but I just needed to work on my walk and that it was too stiff. Instead of letting it crush me, I spent hours practicing in front of a mirror and studied videos of professional models to get it just right. Money was tight, and there were nights I wondered if I had made a huge mistake. But every time I thought about giving up, I used to remember the joy I felt sketching designs in med school and how miserable I was trying to live someone else's dream, and that kept me going. I started meeting people in the industry, like photographers, designers, and other models. Some were helpful and offered tips and introductions, and others were just as struggling as I was. And then slowly but surely, things started to turn around. I got a gig in a small magazine and then a local runway show. Each job was a step forward, no matter how small. And my endless struggle and hard work finally paid off in a way I could only dream of when New York Fashion Week rolled around. I had been catching up on every gig for months and was hitting every audition and networking event I could find. During one of the shows, I was backstage helping out and hoping to make some connections, and that was when it happened. A scout from one of the top modeling agencies noticed me. I remember standing there holding a rack of clothes when this woman walked up and introduced herself as Linda. She looked me up and down and her eyes narrowed as if assessing every detail. She told me that she had been watching me for a while and that I had a unique look with an edge. She gave me her card and told me to call her the next day, and trust me, I barely slept that night from excitement. The next morning I called her and we set up a meeting at the agency's office. As scheduled, I went to her office and the place was sleek and buzzing with activity. Linda introduced me to some top designers who were really interested in my mix of classic and edgy styles. We chatted about my background and about my journey from med school to fashion, and they seemed genuinely interested in my story. Not long after, I got the call I had been waiting for, that I was booked for my first major runway show. It was for a renowned designer, and the moment felt surreal. The preparation was intense, from rehearsals and fittings to endless hours of practicing my walk to make sure everything was perfect. The day of the show finally came and I was drowning in nervousness. The backstage area was chaotic, with models, makeup artists, and stylists all working. When it was finally my turn to step onto the runway, I pushed through the curtains and into the blinding lights. The rush was indescribable. The cameras, the audience, the adrenaline, it all came together in a blur, but I focused on my stride, my expression, and the way the clothes moved with me. The applause at the end was like nothing I had ever experienced. It was my debut, and by the looks of it, I could sense that it was a success. After the show, the buzz was immediate. Designers and agents approached me and praised my performance. Linda, the scout who had discovered me, pulled me aside with a proud smile and appreciated me as well. From that point on, everything changed, and Linda was like an angel sent by God, just for me. I started getting booked for more shows and photo shoots. My face appeared in fashion magazines and designers clamored to work with me. My striking presence on the runway quickly made me a sought-after model, if I do say so myself. Looking back, I felt it was all worth it, and my persistence had finally paid off in a way I never imagined, and for the first time I felt like I was living my dream. I was exactly where I was meant to be, and the future looked brighter than ever. Then, after I had gotten quite stable and successful in my field and everything was working out smoothly, I decided it was time to dive into something that had been my dream since those med school days, and it was creating my own designs and dresses. I wanted to create a line that blended high fashion with streetwear, something innovative and inclusive that spoke to a larger audience. Using the platform and influence I had gained from modeling over all those years, I launched my own clothing line. The first collection was quite nerve-wracking to release. We had a small show in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn which was filled with graffiti art and industrial vibes that matched the aesthetic of my designs. I remember standing backstage and watching all the models strut down the runway in my clothes, and the response was incredible. People praised the innovation and inclusivity, and it felt like a validation of everything I had worked for. One of the highlights was when a top fashion critic wrote that my clothing line was a breath of fresh air in the industry, and the designs were not only stylish but easily accessible to everyone too. Seeing that review was a pinch-me moment, and it made all the late nights and hard work worth it. But I didn't want to stop there. I knew I had a voice and a platform, and I wanted to use it for something meaningful, and so I started sharing my own struggles with mental health and started talking openly about the pressure I felt during med school and the anxiety that came with chasing my dreams. I wanted to inspire others to pursue their passions despite societal pressures. I remember speaking at a mental health awareness event in Central Park. The turnout was amazing, and after my talk, people even came up to thank me for being so open about my journey. After that, I got into charity work, and it was something I had always wanted to do. With my growing success, I had the resources to make a real difference, and so I started by volunteering at local shelters and hospitals, meeting kids and people in need. There was this one boy, Max, who I met at a children's hospital. He was a huge fan of fashion, and I saw a mini-me in him. We used to spend hours talking about designs and his favorite trends, and I even ended up designing a custom outfit just for him. Seeing his face light up when he tried it on was priceless. I also organized charity fashion shows, where all proceeds went to mental health organizations and underfunded schools. Over time, my parents also saw how serious and passionate I was about my new gig, and they slowly came around and eventually became my biggest supporters. One of the first signs that they were starting to embrace my career change was when my mom, Hannah, called me up and asked about one of my designs she saw online, and after hearing her genuine interest and pride in my line, I designed a custom piece for her, and from then on she used to wear it everywhere, and then tell me about all the compliments she had received. My dad, Gerald, took a bit longer to come around because he has always been more reserved and a bit stubborn too. But one day he surprised me by showing up at my studio with a big grin on his face. He spent the afternoon there and asked questions about the process, met my team, and even tried on a few pieces. Seeing him so engaged and interested, I knew I had finally earned his respect. And from then on, they used to come to my shows here and there, and they even started wearing my designs regularly. My dad, who always had a very classic style, started rocking some of my more colorful pieces at his medical conferences. And when his colleagues asked him about it, he used to boast about me, which made me jump on cloud nine. Seeing my parents transform from worried skeptics to my biggest cheerleaders has been one of the most rewarding parts of my journey. Then, one day, I was headed to the hospital to visit the kids I supported through my charity, and I was carrying my usual bag of art supplies, toys, and drawing books for them. The kids' smiles and excitement upon seeing all these gifts made every bit of effort worth it. As I was returning, I almost bumped into someone standing near the nurse's station, and when I looked up, it was Michelle. "Alex?" Before I could respond, a young girl burst out of one of the rooms. I remembered her as Lily and started thanking me. "Thank you so much for bringing us gifts, Mr. Alex. I love the sketchbook and the markers you brought me." "Hey Lily, I am glad you liked them. Have you started drawing any new designs yet?" "Yeah, I have got so many ideas. Can you come to see them?" "Maybe some other time, Lily, okay?" "Okay, Mr. Alex." The nurse who came with Lily thanked me for everything, and through the whole thing, I could feel Michelle's eyes boring into me. Then, as I was done, she spoke up again. "So what's a no-good med school dropout doing here? Have you started playing Savior now?" "Hi, Michelle. It has been a while, but I see you haven't changed a bit, still as charming as ever." "Of course. I didn't expect to see you back here. What happened? Your dress-up didn't last long, I guess, so you are into this thing now, right?" "Actually, I have been pretty busy. After I left med school, I started a clothing line. It is doing really well now." "A clothing line? How predictable. And you think that's something to be proud of?" "Yes, I do. My line's been featured in several major magazines, and I have been able to support these kids through my charity. It feels good to give back, you know." something I bet you never experienced. You think you are so much better now, don't you? Just because you have a few articles of clothing with your name on them. I'm not trying to be better than anyone, Michelle. I'm just happy with my life and what I have accomplished. I'm sorry if that bothers you. Bother me? Don't flatter yourself. I just find it funny how someone can think they are so important because of a few fashion shows. I don't need to justify my happiness to you, Michelle, but judging by the jealousy seeping through every word you speak, I would say I'm doing far better than you. Don't you dare patronize me, Alex. You always thought you were so righteous. Goodbye, Michelle. Try not to trip over your own ego on your way out. I had known Michelle for a while, and so I had figured out her game real quick. She was the type to talk smack up front and then secretly stew in jealousy later. And so just for kicks, I hit up a mutual friend to see what she was really thinking. Turns out, she had been kicking herself for dumping me and regretting it big time after searching for my success. Classic Michael. My buddies warned me that she might pull some stunt to worm her way back into my life, and wouldn't you know it, that is exactly what happened. After a few days, she tried to weasel her way back in, all sorry and whatnot. But I had seen that act before, and I shut her down real quick and made her choke on her own regrets. It felt damn good to achieve what I set out for, and to shove it back in the faces of those who doubted me and were not there when I needed them most.